This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Boring. 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 Boring.
You got it work. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what we're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for the immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Welcome to yet another edition of Lembit Öpik Live here on unprecedented.tv. Today we're going to talk about the madness of net zero. That is the idea that if the United Kingdom decarbonizes, even that's a misnomer, it really means stops making carbon dioxide, that things will get better. It's a crazy idea. To be specific, there are people who will tell you that if human beings don't produce any carbon dioxide at all, we'll stop the climate emergency. In this program, I'm going to argue there isn't one. And even if there was, that if human beings stopped making carbon dioxide, it wouldn't make any difference. But before we go into that, big thank you. The numbers keep going up. Really appreciate your patronage here at Unprecedented TV. Claire Dyer, big thanks to Claire Dyer with Dire Consequences. She's doing a great job on that show. Christine Joanna Hart, Inside the Mind is one of my favorites. We've got Nick Dark. Perhaps if you're watching this from the archive, Nick Dark and the Dark Side's already gone to publication here on Unprecedented. Where there's dark, there's light. A pretty spiritual insight into the human condition. Tim Scott with Tim Scott Uncancelled, so much more as well. And of course, Basil Valentine with the Basil Valentine Show. But today, it's me, Lembit Öpik, and we're going to be discussing that subject, the madness of net zero. Why? Because it is crazy. This idea that we've got some kind of an emergency going on out there, that we're wrecking the climate. I simply don't accept it. And even if it was true, we're actually doing nothing to change that. That's my proposition. So I'm really kind of looking forward to having a conversation today with somebody who knows quite a lot about the subject. And that is Jason Patchett, who is not just a very eloquent person, but also somebody who knows quite a lot about energy. Jason, good to see you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Talk yourself up about energy.
Well, first and foremost, Jason Patchett, welcome, and thank you for inviting me on this show, Lembit. I'm in the energy industry itself, and I get to see the folly of net zero, especially when we are pushing the renewables aspects of net zero, and that's what we're only doing is offsetting our carbon emissions. Yes, we're cooking the books, basically. We're not doing it here in the UK. We're just offsetting it to China and India to make that steel, which we so desperately need to make these wonderful, lovely, visionary wind turbines we see off the coasts of the United Kingdom.
I take it you're being sarcastic. I take it you're being sarcastic about...
Oh, yes. Yes, I'm very sarcastic about it because it's ridiculous. If you couldn't be sarcastic about it, watching some of those politicians, their religion, it is their religion, and they are just fanatics of this net zero project. So yeah, I'm totally against it. If it was legitimate, if they were talking the realities of net zero in the sense of what and how we produce all of this equipment and then discuss the efficiencies of that equipment, then I will perhaps be glad to be more serious about the subject with these people. But they're lobbied.
Okay, so the big picture is you don't think that net zero makes any sense, or to quote Richard Tice from Reform UK, net stupid zero. Just so that we define what net zero means, how would you define, before we pull it to pieces, and I think I want to pull it to pieces, I don't make any bones about this. I think net zero is nonsense. But before we pull it to pieces, can you define in your words what net zero means to you? What do they mean by it?
It's the Paris Accord states 2015 not to add any more greenhouse gases or emissions to the atmosphere and not to increase over the 2% threshold. In fact, I think we've actually breached that already. So it's no longer adding to emissions to the atmosphere. That's the basics of it. But as I say, it's a lie. It's a lie. We're emitting more than ever.
Yeah, one of the ironies in all of this, maybe viewers don't know this, but the year with the most amount of oil usage in the history of the human race, and therefore the largest carbon dioxide emissions in history, was 2024. And the only reason it's not 2025 is because the year hasn't ended yet. That's the only reason. So fundamentally, these people whom I think Nigel Farage implied followed a religion, and it's a phrase I've used often, of the religion of net zero. These people say that if the human race stops emitting stops emitting carbon dioxide, so we are net zero as a species, then the climate emergency will end. I'm going to throw a little chart at you. I don't know if you've seen it. I'm going to show it to you. I'll explain it because this is one of my favorite charts. The global carbon cycle. It's really the global carbon dioxide cycle. And we've got to get this. We've got to get this right. Right. Vegetation and land produces absolutely tons of carbon dioxide and absorbs it. So do the oceans. Human beings produce a tiny amount. What that chart's telling you, that the whole of the human race is producing 29 gigatons. That's 29 billion tons. But vegetation produces 439 gigatons, and the oceans produce 332 gigatons. In simple terms, for roughly R29, the nature produces almost 800. So if we got rid of ours, the planet wouldn't notice. Some people say it's 40 gigatons from human beings, but in essence, you don't have to be a mathematician. You don't really have to understand this chart, but 97% or so, minimum 95% of all the carbon dioxide that's emitted is actually produced by nature. Who knew, Jason? Who knew?
That's right, it is. But even greater folly when you've got the vegetation and land there. If you look at the biomass aspect of the of renewables, etc., that requires wood pellets, and it will assist in the deforestation of the planet. It doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. We do need the vegetation, as you quite rightly say, to absorb that, but it still emits it in the most greatest numbers. And if we localize that to United Kingdom, which is what I tend to focus on, of course, is that we emit 0.88% of global emissions. That's it. And we've reduced that since 1990 by 56% now. So we've really kind of done our bit, but it's just so negligible as to what we emit into the atmosphere, but at the cost of what? And that is what my focus is on. Is it the cost of jobs, British industry, for absolute no gain whatsoever?
You made a video. I want to play that video, actually. I'm going to play it in its entirety because I think it's pretty good. So let's just watch you on energy generally, then we'll come back.
Good morning, Team Forum. I hope you are all well. This is the first of two short videos about the oil and gas industry and how we in Norfolk support the industry, not solely off of our own coastline, but the UK as a whole. I am in Beacon Business Park, which is one of several business parks and trading estates around Norfolk, which supports the oil and gas industry, from fabrication services, hydraulic specialists, diesel engine specialists, and many, many more. There are also many other non-technical elements that support the industry: medical services, food supplies, vessel delivery of spares, parts and materials. The main major operators in Norfolk employ some of the most experienced and qualified engineers in the UK: marine engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and so on. The UK emits approximately 0.9% of global emissions. 0.9%. In Norfolk, it is estimated that 40,000 people are employed directly or indirectly in the oil and gas industry. It is 200,000 people UK-wide. So we are jeopardizing those jobs for approximately 0.9%, whilst China and India are emitting in greater numbers than ever. They say renewables will make up for that shortfall. But let me tell you this. Equinor, a Norwegian company, owns Sheringham Shoals. All down the Norfolk coastline, those wind farms are owned by foreign companies. EDF, RWE, Statkraft, Ørsted, and many, many more. They would prefer to employ their own engineers over British engineers. Where will our jobs go? They will go. Norfolk is under threat as it is. Our farming industry, the decimation of the fishing industry, the tourism industry under threat because of the national insurance contribution debacle, and many, many more. The collapse of the oil and gas industry will be nothing but disastrous for Norfolk.
So there we have it. You have a pretty clear position there that the collapse of the oil and gas industry will be disastrous for Norfolk, but that would be also true for the whole country, wouldn't it? Because we are seeing not just the disappearance of jobs. All we're going to do is import exactly the same oil and gas, which has been sucked out of the ground by Norway. It's the same oil and gas. It's just they're taking it out instead of us.
That's exactly what it is. For example, in Norfolk alone, they're thinking of converting the Bacton gas terminus into a hydrogen fuel plant, which I understand. Actually, I'm quite pro-hydrogen, but it's how you make that hydrogen. In this form, they're promoting grey hydrogen, which is by natural gas. And indeed, on the Bacton Energy Hub document, it states by 2040, we will have to import that gas. What sense does that make to the British oil and gas industry? Miliband's exploration cessation is just going to decimate the industry. When we're going to require that oil and gas, regardless, we still need the oil and gas. When you import the gas from overseas, you import it by liquid natural gas. So natural gas is then cooled, it comes in a liquid state, and then what happens is it's transferred over many oceans via diesel guzzling ships. And then on this side of the pond, it will be regasified. Both ends, you need intense energy to convert into liquid and then back into natural gas. So whatever happens, whatever we do, we're using energy.
Yeah. Well, it does seem to me that fundamentally, you've put your finger on the button there. We use energy. We have to get it from somewhere. I incidentally think that the solar and wind agenda is absolutely balmy. I understand that they want to put thousands and thousands of solar panels onto perfectly good farmland around where you are. And of course, when it's dark and when it's not windy, you're not going to get any wind power and you're not going to get any solar power. So you still have to have something called spinning reserve. Spinning reserve means that you use oil and gas to replace the missing renewable power. So you still,
there are alternatives.
Still have to have it.
For backup is nuclear, but again, we will deal with oil and gas at present, and we'll deal with solar paneling, and let's deal with wind. For example, if you look at the wind and the turbines themselves, the average, let's take the mean. The average turbine is approximately 350 tons. That includes the aerofoils and all the contents, the magnets inside the brakes, the generation packages. Now, that is predominantly steel manufactured. We in Britain only manufacture 2% of that steel. Most of it's imported. Now to manufacture that steel, you use what we call coking coal. Coking coal is a pure carbon product. So if you estimate we've got approximately 11,000 turbines in the UK at the moment, we'll average out at 8 to 10 megawatt turbines, and to manufacture that amount of steel. So we're looking at over 6 million tons of coking coal. Now that coking coal itself emits 3.66 times of CO2 per 1 ton of steel manufactured. So we're actually up to about 17, 18 million tons of CO2 emissions. Again, as we said at the front end of this video, we're not stopping our emissions, we're just offsetting it. And it's just, as I say, it's cooking the books. It makes us look great at home. The check sheets look great. But really, China's doing the emissions. And China's emitting with less regulation as well. Whereas where we would emit here we would suppress as much as we can the carbon emissions through scrubbers, for example. In China, it's not so much, it's not as highly regulated as it would be here. So it's all a fallacy, it's all a lie. If you also look at how you connect wind, because they all have to support one another, wind, solar, biomass, whatever it may be. How do we interconnect all of those elements of generation? We've got the copper cabling, we've got the pylons, because we decided not to do them underground. We've got inverters, transformers, and so on and so forth. So how, firstly, there's much more carbon footprint we clearly got there. But secondly, how efficient is that grid network? It isn't efficient. You've got 11% efficiency in the UK for solar panels, 11%, because we are the second but last with irradiation output from the sun in the United Kingdom. So 11%. The latest fantastic tests the government are going to pursue is solar dimming. It's to dim the sun and reflect the heat. That's really going to help our solar panels, isn't it? So they're going to be less than 11%.
It's absolutely crazy. We've got this idiotic idea from Ed Miliband and presumably his little crazed friend there, Greta Thunberg, who dropped out of education. She should have stayed in it, and then she might have learned something about the science of climatology, but she decided not to really focus on that. But Ed Miliband, who now, as you say, seems to be all in favor of dimming the sun. He wanted us to get solar panels. Now he wants to take the sun away. I mean, he couldn't make this stuff up, Jason. It's insane. We get little enough sun anyway. 50 million pounds, I think. Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. But go on, sorry, you were going to say.
But the major factor for me, of course, energy is important, and we need to produce our energy, but we need energy independence. That's the important factor. We are far from independent. We're importing everything, as we previously discussed. But there's two things which are my drivers. One, we have viable other options, such as nuclear. I've mentioned hydrogen and combined cycle gas and steam cycles. Turbines, for example, they're very, very efficient models of what we can use there. But secondly, which is really, really the fly in the ointment for me, is that, as I've mentioned in my video just now, most of these providers of the wind farms, etc., are overseas companies. 48% of these overseas companies are state-owned.
Yeah, this one. I mean, we're looking at. Yeah, we're looking at a video here of Sizewell B, which is a nuclear power station on the east coast of England. And that's owned, as far as I understand it, by EDF, which is a French company. I've actually been there. I've been through the tour. I've been standing where lots of these people are standing. And it was truly impressive. The fact that they produced something like, I think it was, this could be wrong, 2 gigawatts, but a huge amount of power from a small space. And it's completely reliable. Completely predictable, and you don't need to.
And the irony, 2021, when we had a very calm summer, calm period in 2021, we had to import 30% nuclear energy from France because we just didn't have that backup here in the UK. Renewables were non-effective, so we imported nuclear energy, again offsetting everything we do.
Yeah, people are scared of nuclear. I have to say that, just a word about nuclear. My father was a nuclear physicist, and I used to argue with him. I was against nuclear power at the time. But when I was Shadow Energy Minister, that's when I went to this location we're watching on the screen. That's Sizewell. But I also went up to Sellafield and elsewhere. I realized that it's not completely risk-free, but it's very low risk. And the return you get in terms of energy is tremendous. Orders of magnitude more attractive than solar and wind, which are unreliable, take vast amounts of land area, and have to be backed up. And with coal and, coal, gas or oil, you can't back it up with nuclear because you can't turn nuclear on and off fast enough. So you really have to have gas turbines that come on very fast. So I was really impressed when I went round this place. And indeed, I changed the position of my party from being anti-nuclear to pro-nuclear. They didn't want to hear it. They were really uncomfortable. But when they went into government, when they became the lapdog of the Conservatives, they went, yeah, we support nuclear. I'd like to think it had something to do with that. And so, Jason, I'm very much with you. That's not far from where you live, actually. And I wouldn't be afraid of living next to it.
No, but if you are considered, if we bring in carbon emissions into the affray, we are emitting, although it's not, as we said, it's not a religion. I'm not concerned about that. But if these people in government are concerned about the emissions, and we're emitting on a daily basis, what has nuclear done to the environment within this country? When it comes to pollution, nothing. It's done nothing. And that's the point we need to start getting across. And with the advent of small modular reactors, and Rolls-Royce make really well manufactured and proven small modular reactors, they're compatible with local and rural communities. They can set into the community quite well. They can be erected quickly. They don't need refueling as often as a large reactor. So we haven't got to worry about the uranium or plutonium refueling aspects with small modular reactors. So nuclear really is the future, and how we interact the nuclear energy in with other forms of energy. For example, I mentioned hydrogen. We can make pink hydrogen, which create the nuclear framework will create the electrical energy for the electrolysis required to split the molecule of H2O. So it's all there, because to make hydrogen, it's very energy intensive. At the moment, not to digress too much, as I previously expressed, we're going to be using natural gas to make the hydrogen, which is what's called steam reformation. So nuclear is the future. It can be on site. It's non-polluting. We will have to have some storage aspects, of course, but we have no issues with nuclear storage in this country. So yeah, nuclear, without doubt, is the way ahead. But we've also got other forms as well, which are much more reliable. And as you've quite rightly stated, gas turbines are impactful. They're there on demand, whereas wind, solar isn't.
Yeah, and really it's that what I really want to talk about. The fact is that the renewables agenda is a lie. You used the phrase a number of times, because when it's not windy and when it's dark, you don't get any wind or solar. Gas, I think, is one way to make power. But, I'm going to be controversial here. I'd start digging up the coal. I actually think what we need to do is put more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, not less, because I don't for a moment think that we've got any reason to be afraid of carbon dioxide. I won't go into the science of it because you get into complicated phrases like absorption spectrums and logarithmic decay. We don't need to go into it. But in simple terms, what I'm saying is if you have a bit more carbon dioxide, the plants grow better because it's plant food. Carbon dioxide is what plants eat, and then they grow better. They actually put carbon dioxide into greenhouses. If you think about it this way, if you want bigger tomatoes, you put CO2 into the greenhouses. So it's the gas of life, as Jeremy Corbyn's brother says. And so I'd actually dig up the coal and release some of that carbon dioxide, get super cheap power. Everyone's happy. Why aren't we talking about going back to coal?
Well, coal is in abundant form. I mean, we've got plenty of it, of course. I'm probably a little bit more reluctant not to use coal going forward, not because of the CO2. It literally is. It was very bad in the 19th century and into the early 20th century with the smog, etc. We do inhale that in our lungs. So, but we do have carbon capture, storage, and sequestration technology in our hands. So yes, why wouldn't we use that as well? We could use coal in alignment with carbon capture. This is a technology which is growing, and it's going to be the future in alignment with even natural gas as well, because we've got empty wells throughout the North Sea itself. So why not capture that carbon, capture that smog, and put it down underground?
I don't, but I'm saying more.
But yes, we've got lots of coal. Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't want to stop the carbon dioxide coming out. I want to encourage it, because although you won't hear this on the state-sponsored British Broadcasting Corporation, who wrongly say the science is settled. Well, it is settled. There is no climate emergency, but they think it's the opposite. I say that put more carbon dioxide in, the plants grow better. They actually use less water as well for various reasons then as well. So you don't have to water the plants so much. They grow bigger. The whole world gets greener. More people can eat. So I'm going to say, it's really talking with you. I've decided to reach out here, but I'm going to say, let's start releasing carbon dioxide. A friend of mine has an old car. It's a bit of a gas guzzler, and he has a sign in the back window. It says, "This car produces plant food." It is carbon dioxide. I agree with you in terms of the other pollutants. We don't want to have acid rain and that kind of thing, but I would say that's a good solution. I would take the coal out of the ground, and I would put it into the power stations, and I would power Britain. And lo and behold, our energy prices would come down just like they are in China, really low because they use coal.
The irony is that in one of the local coffee shops I frequent on the weekend, there's a farmer who pops in the mornings, and he was telling me a few weeks ago how he's had to buy in powdered carbon because his plant crops haven't got enough carbon dioxide to ingest. So I can see what you're saying. It's detrimental to the farming and the foods industry, without doubt. Yes, perhaps we do need a bit more CO2. I don't deny that. And I mean, again, we have that source on tap here. We're sitting on trillions of cubic feet of natural gas and indeed coal, but it's just not going to be exploited. So we're just going to, again, the nonsense behind it all, we're just importing it. We're just exporting it. So we're emitting regardless. I like to use the analogy of when I was a kid. I would sit in a restaurant or a cafe with my parents, and you have a smoking section and a non-smoking section, and we'd sit in a non-smoking section. However, it was irrelevant. The smoke will still permeate across the room, and we're going to be choking anyway. So that's what's happening in China. We're using the steel in its millions and millions of tonnage. China's manufacturing it, but it's still permeating across the atmosphere.
Well, the carbon dioxide, it doesn't stay in China. How optimistic are you that net zero, the idea of us cutting our minuscule contribution to the overall carbon budget in the atmosphere, how optimistic are you net zero will collapse? And so as not to lead the witness, I'll put my cards on the table. Net zero is net stupid because it can't be even done. And we've only exported, as you said, our emissions. But do you think there's any prospect of the current government or any government taking us to net zero, or the human race not producing carbon dioxide, which would be a balmy thing to do? But do you think there's any prospect of that happening?
Yeah. You're seeing, no pun intended, the winds of change already. Equinor are backing out of Australia because there's less demand from the Australian markets now. The United States are now reducing their emphasis on net zero. So these big companies, at the end of the day, most things in the world, it all revolves around money. And the economics are now saying this is no longer a viable option. Of course, in Britain, we're always behind the curve. but eventually it will grab us, and the economics will say that. And to elaborate a bit further on one of my concerns of net zero is more of the financial and practicality aspects to the end user, and in this case, the great British public. It's costing us a lot of money, but per capita. Our industries are under massive, enormous pressures because of this. And even our farmers, the fertilizers, the increase in cost because fertilizers are generally manufactured with carbon products. So the economics will take over. The people are getting screwed. I'm sorry to be blatant about that, but they are getting screwed. And the money that they're paying out is going overseas. You know, there's an article I read not so long ago about a lot of people saying bring renewables under state ownership. Well, by proxy, it is under state ownership because Ørsted are a Danish state-owned company. Equinor, a Norwegian state-owned company. So none of this money for the Great British Energy Project that Miliband keeps spouting off, staying in the UK. The profits are going overseas. So we've got to keep going back to the people to give more money. This has got another 5 years of these turbines going up. Of course, more emissions in China, more money from the people. So you're right, and by volition, what you're saying is, no, it's going to come to an end because it is unsustainable and indeed it's inefficient.
Thanks so much. That is Jason Patchett, who I think agrees with me that this is not the smartest way to go forward. Have your say. Go to X, and happy to have a chat with you about this. Also, you can have your views elsewhere as well, but do make them known. Maybe you disagree. If you want to come on to Unprecedented TV and explain why you think there is a climate emergency, why we should be cutting carbon dioxide emissions, get in touch. I'll give you the platform. I'll argue with you. I'll give you the platform. That's what free speech is about. That's the difference between us and the old legacy media. They say the science is settled and they tend to cancel people who say that there's no climate emergency. I want to debate because maybe you do have an argument for it. I haven't heard it, and you're welcome to share it with me. Thanks very much to Jason. Thanks very much for watching. I'm Lembit Öpik. That was Lembit Öpik Live here on Unprecedented TV. I'll see you soon.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Boring. 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 Boring.
You got it work. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
Exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages,